Yeah, so I just realized I accidentally deleted the clip that I was planning on using for the intro to this video, so I'm going to painfully and poorly reenact it real quick. Oh my god, Jordan. I'm pretty sure I didn't finish forming my Sepfon and I'm missing a mod on it. Let me go check real quick. Just gotta take... Oh my god, Jordan. I was missing two mods, not just one. Holy crap. I didn't have a Riven, a Bane, or anything like that. I'm missing two full mods and I was still doing that much damage. Holy crap. Hello and welcome to the Warframe tier list. Today we'll be going over Inaros, and first things first, let's go into the builds. So with Inaros, I have one main build, which is Eclipse over his second ability, Devour. The reason I'm dropping his second ability is because Devour locks you in place, and it's pretty much entirely useless at any stage of the game. The reason I didn't drop Sandstorm or Desiccation is because they do have fringe use cases. With the Augment Elemental Sandstorm, you can do fun meme builds and low level missions to make this ability kill. Outside of that though, it is entirely useless. And by low level missions, I mean like 30 and below. As for Desiccation, Desiccation is actually pretty useful as it staggers enemies and gives you a small heal over time. While while the stagger isn't amazing and while the heal is also pretty bad, the stagger does set up finishers, so you can just desiccate them and then finisher. And this allows you to use Arcane Ultimatum, and Arcane Ultimatum is the highest armor arcane in the game. Arcane Ultimatum gives you 1200 armor compared to Guardian's 900. This means if you're planning on doing Endurance Steel Path missions, you can run Arcane Guardian in tandem with Arcane Ultimatum for a total of 2100 armor, which is actually really, really useful. Otherwise, you could just drop Guardian for Arcane Ultimatum, but Guardian is just for comfort if you really don't want to have to do anything, which I guess Inaros is notorious for. Now, as for why I'm using Eclipse, it is because Eclipse with the total Eclipse Augment gives Inaros some sort of team utility that he otherwise doesn't have. On top of this, one of the main ways that you can heal yourself as health tanks, if you're not using something like Gloom, is either Life Strike, heavy attack builds, or using a Daikyu primary with the Amalgam Daikyu Target Acquired mod, which gives you 3% lifesteal on Nakanos. Since now you have lifesteal on Nakanos, this means that you can run an Exodia Contagion build on a Nakana Zal, and Exodia Contagion notoriously works extremely well with Eclipse, double dipping on direct hits. Not only that, you do have the mod space to slot Holster Amp for free and Vigorous Swap for free, which also like quintuple dip on Exodia Contagion. If you don't care about your secondary damage, which in this case is the Nucor, since you're not using any Augur mods, you can freely use a full DPS Nucor, which is of course very strong, especially with Arcane Avenger. But if you don't really care about your secondary, you can even drop Avenger for Arcane Fury, and now your Contagion just does absurd levels of damage, more than you'll ever need it to do as Inaros, as the longest you'll ever go into a mission as Inaros is about 2 to 2.5 hours, and you're already overkilling the enemies by a significant amount with this build loadout. If you really like Inaros, you could Umbra form him and then slot Aviator up in the Exilus slot. This gives you a main mod slot to slot something like Stretch for a further 45% range for total Eclipse for more team utility. Or you could slot something like Carnus Carapace for more defense, Armored Agility for more defense and sprint speed for fun. Or you could also slot the Mecha mod, so you could slot Mecha Pulse, and then change out Holster Amp for Mecha Empowered, and then you're even tankier, as now you of course have the Mecha set, giving you a crap ton of armor. However, if you're just doing missions up to an hour to an hour and a half, you really don't need to do all this, and a build like this is perfectly fine. Now, as for the focus school, I'm using Unero for the 200 armor and poise, so you don't have to slot prime sure-footed, and of course caustic strike to armor strip the acolytes, which is very, very useful. One other thing that you can do on Inaros, this is personal preference, but he does have an augment called Negation Swarm for his 4th ability, and what this does is it gives you status immunity, which is also prime sure-footed, but the main thing is it gives you immunity to slash procs and heat procs, which are of course extremely annoying on any health tank, so just being able to outright ignore them is very useful. The downside to this is it now means that instead of Scarab Swarm being a you cast it once then forget about it for the rest of the mission unless you get like purged, you now have to constantly keep up your strength, like you have to constantly keep the stacks up. So I personally didn't like it, but if you do like it, feel free to use it. As to the companion, it is just a standard Panzer mod with the synth mods equipped, and if you're going for longer missions and you're going the mecha route, of course, I don't know why I typed that, it would just be a Roxacube route with the standard mods. Actually, I didn't really think this far ahead. You use the Roxacube route for the Protect augment, but Inaros doesn't have shields. I actually do not know what cube route would be best for each of Inaros, but honestly, I'm sure it doesn't really matter. Alright, moving on. Now moving on to the rankings, we're discussing Inaros in relation to 4 separate topics. Firstly is KPM, secondly is survivability, thirdly is viability, and finally how fun he is to play. All of this data is sampled from a 1-hour solo Steel Path Mott run with no Spectres, on-call, and of course no Archon Shards. Now let's begin with the first topic, Inaros' KPM. I will keep this short and sweet as I do not believe that there is a reason to extend this video for too long. Inaros' KPM gets a flat B rank. Now a lot of people might be surprised as why it's so high, and the reality is, the majority of your kills on this game come from your weapons, and Inaros can run a good weapon loadout that gets him higher KPM than most other dedicated nuke frames, such as Ember and Lavos even. And the reality is just, weapons are honestly kind of overtuned. You can't in good faith say that Inaros gets bad KPM when you can just run this Zal build and get easily 130 KPM every single run without even really trying, and you're in like, it's like not really a cheese thing either. Like even if you ran a gun build as Inaros and you didn't run Exodia Contagion, you would still get like 100 to 110 KPM just because you can freely run Arcane Avenger, you could freely run a different damage Arcane, you could run like a Brahma or a Tsar, or you could just run around with a nuke ore with an Avenger, and I've already done this on multiple videos. Like, a good example is the Nyx video, where I got like 110 KPM as Nyx just slowly walking around using her Assimilate augment with the nuke ore, and I still got good KPM, so if Nyx can do that, and Inaros can do it too, and he's not confined to walking speed. So, the reality is, it's hard to get a low KPM rank, just because how strong weapon loadouts are on this game. Now moving on to the second topic, his survivability, and his survivability also gets roughly a B+ rank. The reason for this is because his survivability, a lot of people over-exaggerate his survivability. Now don't get me wrong, you can go do a Steel Path Relic right now and instantly die 30 seconds into an Exterminate. Like that can happen. Will it happen often? No. And the reason why is because Bombards just one-shot pretty much any health tank in this game. If a Bombard is over level 100 and you don't have adaptation stacks or your Arcane's up, they will one-shot you. But if you're doing an extended mission for like an hour, even on Mott where the enemies deal 200% additional damage, meaning that they deal 3x damage, in an hour, I didn't die a single time, and I only got cap procced once. So his survivability really isn't that bad. The problem of his survivability comes from him not actually scaling further than an hour, which does matter a bit, but it doesn't matter all that much. And if it didn't matter at all, I would genuinely give him like an A+ rank for his survivability. Him having no shields is bad, because that means that you have like no chance of surviving the random one-shot from Blitz XMS or Bombards. And if he just had some shield, if he just had like the half shield gate, like 0.3 seconds of invincibility, he would be able to survive versus them. But since he doesn't, he does just randomly die. And then of course, again, he doesn't have scaling past like an hour to an hour and a half at the most, which is why I think that he deserves the B plus rank for his survivability. Now, moving on to the third topic, his viability. And his viability is just outright bad. There's really no reason to play Inaros over any other Warframe in the game, because yes, although I said that most of your KPM comes from your weapons, that doesn't mean that almost every other Warframe in the game couldn't slap this exact same build on and just perform with it even better. There's not a single thing that Inaros does that there's not at least 20 other Warframes that can do that exact same thing and just perform better with it. That's just how it is. There's not a single thing. Not only that, one of Inaros' best use cases is for newer players who are still learning the game, but even in that regard, there are still other Warframes that do the exact same thing but better. There's Rhino who does it better, there's Revenant who does it better, there's Neza who does it infinitely times better, there's Nidus who does it better. Like, do I have to go on? So, he just doesn't do anything. Like, there's not even a niche, like, there's not like a niche strat where like Inaros is somehow the best at something. Like, there's none of that. Even for Hydroid, there's like a niche use case for him doing Silver Grove Specters. With Inaros, there's just nothing. So I can't find a way to realistically give him anything but an F for his viability rank. Now moving on to the final topic, how fun he is. And this is kind of a mixed bag. For the first few minutes that you're playing Inaros, especially with a build like the Exodia Contagion Sol build, it was kind of fun. The reason being was because I was doing a bunch of Steel Path survival relics as Inaros, like leveling him up. And every single run, as Inaros, I did the most amount of kills in the mission and had the most damage. So, like, there was a fun aspect to it of that, but outside of that, his actual gameplay loop is incredibly boring, as you're either sitting there, if you're going a gun build, you're just sitting there shooting a gun and you don't really, you're not using any of your abilities, like, at all. Like, if you, especially if you go the Gloom build, you're literally not using any of your abilities. Like, you just stack your forward to get the armor bonus, and then you press Gloom, and then after that you just pretend like you don't have any abilities. And then if you're going the Eclipse build, you at least have to recast Eclipse, but it's just an incredibly boring playstyle. But since there is the meme potential of being able to out DPS your entire party as Inaros, there's at least that. So I won't give him an F for fun, but I will still end up giving him a D rank for his fun. In conclusion, Inaros is a C- tier Warframe, and there's really not much else to say, so I will leave it at that.